and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we start with some good news for a change. Little Rock has adopted an LGBT rights law in defiance of a state ban.
And in Houston, the LGBT rights ordinance is safe for now.
Get ready for the Supreme Court marriage cases on April 28th. There are going to be actions on the 27th and 28th across the country, and you can go to uniteformarriage.org to look them up. We're going to have Evan Wolfson on the show next week to talk about the oral arguments at the Supreme Court on the 28th.
Yes, Mr. Marriage Equality is, or freedom to marry, he would prefer I say, is going to analyze the arguments and tell us what's next and give us any predictions he may have. Very sad story this week. Lesbian feminist pioneer Sidney Abbott died in a tragic fire. We'll tell you a little about her career.
This summer's Michigan Women's Music Festival will be the last.
40 years. A trans teen has won the right to wear her makeup for her driver's license photo in South Carolina.
Prominent Catholics in San Francisco want their anti-gay Archbishop removed.
Good luck with that. Tonga, Malawi, and El Salvador are trying to move against gay people.
I'm going to briefly review 4 new Broadway shows.
And, there's a hot new TV show to talk about, too. But we start with the news, and we start in the South, in Arkansas, where you may remember that the state passed a law a few weeks ago that said that no local cities, towns, whatever, can pass non-discrimination laws that go beyond what's in the state law.
This was already done in Tennessee, and I guess is being looked at elsewhere. So Little Rock went ahead and passed a bill banning city contractors from discriminating based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Passed it 7-2.
Yeah, well, now that law that applies only to city employment and to city contractors may, in fact, be a way around what the new state law says, but it's clearly going to go into litigation. But they're standing up, a little civil disobedience, perhaps, in Little Rock from the city council.
Well, similarly in Eureka Springs, now they have an ordinance protecting rights based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Now that's on the ballot on May 12th. And
for possible repeal.
And that could be nullified by state law anyway this summer when that law goes into effect. But Mayor Robert Berry there says that he may use this to challenge it in court. I guess if it survives, of course, has to survive the referendum.
There's a big split in Eureka Springs because on the one hand it's known as a very gay town, like one of
the capital of the Ozarks.
Yes, but on the other hand it's also a center for religious fervor. They hold an annual passion play there.
Jesus Parade.
The Jesus Parade kicked out the Methodists, you may remember, a couple of weeks ago.
Just for being nice to us.
Yes, very Christian of them. So the major national news organizations, including the New York Times, have been writing about this huge split in Eureka Springs. And the right-wing pastors have been freaking out about this non-discrimination law that was passed by the city council there. And so they've been doing all sorts of publicity and YouTube videos and all sorts of things. But one of their guys, who's a spokesman for this, has now been revealed to have been convicted some years ago of 3 brutal rapes.
Including of an elderly woman. He did pay his debt to society.
Yeah, and it was a long time ago, but...
he's a rapist.
He ought to, think about...
Judge not, lest ye be judged.
Are we really the problem? Anyway, in other cities around the nation, Tulsa, Oklahoma, their city council has added a sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression non-discrimination clause to their Fair Housing Act. The mayor still has to decide whether to sign it. but that's a great step forward.
In Florida, a bill to let tax-funded agencies discriminate against religious groups has been derailed.
Well, this was the ongoing question about whether they were going to pass a law that allowed religiously.
No, any agency where somebody had a religious objection.
Yes.
That was what they
yes,
proposed.
I was going to say motivated.
Yeah.
Adoption agencies, et cetera, be exempt from non-discrimination laws seems to be dead. There are still ways they could bring it up again. We've announced its death for a couple of weeks running. And in Michigan, they're considering similar legislation that they may or may not be able to kill there.
In Maine, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has been withdrawn because they don't want the same thing that they had in Indiana in terms of a fracas over that.
And it was, in fact, a Maine Republican who withdrew the proposed Religious Freedom Restoration Act under attack. Was it there? No, somewhere else that they got
But truth has been restored in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, because, but they picked an anti-gay book as their state book. The Bible is the state book of Tennessee.
You know, this country, it's going like this.
Yeah, well,
the split.
Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time.
Clay
for a
Aiken
divorce.
is complaining about this. No more moderates in politics. I continue to watch his reality show.
And which way is he going?
He wants to be a moderate in the middle, and he complains that the right is too right and the left is too left, and he wants to be a moderate. He didn't get elected.
The only thing in the middle of the road are yellow lines and armadillos.
Gee, did you make that up?
Nope.
In Houston, they have had
Speaking of armadillos.
They've had an ongoing fight over a non-discrimination law passed there. The right wing tried to get a vote on it, a referendum, and were told that they had not gathered enough signatures. So they have been going to court to complain about this. There have been charges back and forth that our side subpoenaed sermons from ministers about this, and our side had to back down on that. But finally, a judge in Houston has ruled that the city was correct in saying that the right wing had not gathered enough signatures for a repeal vote on the non-discrimination law.
But the right wing may appeal that decision.
I'm sure they will.
Well, we're not sure about anything, but they might do that.
Yes.
Back to Tennessee for a second. A swingers club is rebranding itself as a church to get around the zoning laws in Madison. And the dungeon in their place is now called the choir room, and the game room is called Fellowship Hall. Officials there in Madison gave tentative approval to this, but they want proof that worship is going on.
But who are they worshiping?
Exactly, and they are not going to have trouble finding it.
Would there be any advantage to our declaring ourselves a church?
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, religions used to be based in sex, basically. You know, and sexual symbols and phallic things.
No
and
sex going
vaginas,
on here.
Everything. No. But I'm just saying, sexuality and religion used to be quite intertwined.
For purposes of procreation, I assume.
Fertility rights and all those kinds of things. Sure.
Okay.
And fun.
All right, I'm going back to Oklahoma, where the Senate has removed a non-discrimination clause that referred to sexual orientation and gender identity from their regulation, the state's regulation of Uber and Lyft. So they can throw you out if they don't like you kissing in the back seat.
Uber says we don't discriminate, so don't worry.
Okay. In Indiana, the fallout from the Governor Mike Pence screwing around with Religious Freedom Restoration Acts continues. You may remember that the first corporate leader to lead the fight against that bad bill was the CEO of Angie's List.
Well, he was thinking of pulling out of about a $100 million project in Indianapolis.
Good guy. So he has resigned his position at Angie's List because he wants to run for office to fix the mess.
Bill Osterly is his name.
Good for him. And in the U.S. Senate, you may remember a couple of weeks ago that they took this sort of non-binding resolution vote on giving equal benefits to married same-sex couples in Veterans Affairs and Social Security, no matter where people lived.
Yes, and it was approved, even though it didn't have the force of law, and we got all the Democrats and 11 Republicans.
So now the U.S. Senate has taken a voice vote on something more substantial, approving a resolution to tell the conferees on a bill to protect benefits for same-sex married couples in those areas. This is a bill that's going to conference with the House. The House is expected to reject this, but
they're not very nice over there.
And the Republican senators didn't want to go on record in this vote as protecting benefits for same-sex married couples, but they did not raise objections, and it was a unanimous voice vote to instruct the Senate conferees to stick up for this.
Some people asleep? Now, of course, you know, we're going to tell you about what's going on with the Supreme Court and same-sex marriage next week, but on May 1st, they are going to conference about 2 other LGBT cases, possibly for the next term. One is the case versus the Department of Corrections by a transgender inmate over the denial of medical care, and the other is King versus Christie, which is a challenge to a state ban on conversion therapy. So our opponents wanting to overturn the New Jersey law banning so-called conversion therapy for minors.
The prison case is the Massachusetts case.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the Justice Department has been very involved in the pleas by a Georgia inmate, Ashley Diamond, a transgender woman, to be treated better in a Georgia prison.
Treated better? She was raped repeatedly in prison because she's treated like she's put in with the men. And she's quite, at least effeminate, if not, you know.
And now she's saying, because she's in the men's prison and she wasn't getting hormones, but she was behaving with a little effeminacy, that she may have contributed to the rapes. That's how much they've beaten her down.
Well, the judge denied a transfer to a lower security prison.
Exactly.
Now, they have provided some hormone treatment, but her lawyer says it's much too low to be therapeutic.
And she's in a more restricted area of the prison, but that doesn't mean she doesn't still interact with the whole prison population, male prison population, regularly. So she still feels at risk. So this is an ongoing problem.
Yes.
In Louisiana, they're still considering their Religious Freedom Restoration Act and tinkering with maybe changing it, maybe not. But IBM, which is a big employer there, has told Governor Jindal, that passing such a bill in any of these forms will create a hostile environment for their employees, and they are against it.
Well, Governor Jindal is one of 125 people running for the Republican nomination for president. There are about 20, right?
At least.
And now they're all getting asked whether they go to a same-sex wedding.
Well, this is interesting because it is a conservative radio host who is asking this. You know, these hosts, unlike us,
we're nice.
Try to figure out what is the question I could ask that'll really put people on the spot and really reveal them.
I'm surprised it's coming from the right wing. It would be a good question for us.
But this is their version. You know, well, we might ask a question about non-discrimination laws rather than will you go to a same-sex wedding. But Hugh Hewitt, who is this conservative radio host, or maybe a little libertarian, has decided that this is his branded question of the year. He's asking the Republican candidates whether they would attend a same-sex wedding. So here are the results so far.
Rick Santorum said attending a gay wedding would violate his Catholic faith. Marco Rubio...
Wait, we haven't finished with Rick. He would love them and support them, but he would not attend the wedding.
Well, he wouldn't support them in their sin.
But he'd support them as people.
What does that mean?
Sinful people.
What does that mean?
What does that
That's
mean?
all we're asking for is you support us in terms of the law with equal protection.
Hugh Hewitt, there are some follow-up questions you could be asking. So on to who? Marco Rubio?
Well, Marco Rubio said he would go to such a wedding. But of course, the other big news about Marco Rubio is that he's reaching out to the log cabin Republicans through his staff. And he was a group which was described by the New York Times as a socially liberal group. Obviously, they've never been to a meeting. But, while he would go to a same-sex wedding, and he says also, his big statement this week was, he must have learned it at the Log Cabin Club, sexual orientation, you're born with it, Did you know that? But he's against everything. He's against same-sex marriage. He's against civil rights protections. He
voted against ENDA, that watered-down, useless bill.
So
he said he would attend a close friend's gay wedding, but he wouldn't condone it.
And he defended that horrible Indiana Religious Freedom Restoration Act when it was still a bad law.
But no one seems to like him.
Well, Martin Cuthron, who is the head of the family Foundation of Kentucky, said, to the right, it sounds mealy-mouthed, the kinds of things that Rubio has said, and to the left, it sounds patronizing.
He also says that same-sex marriage should be put up for votes, popular votes, not decided by judges. I continue to believe that all these extremist right-wingers who are against judges making decisions are treasonous and should be prosecuted for violating the United States Constitution.
We are a republic, after all, and we elect people to make the laws. And, I'm not generally for direct democracy unless, government officials refuse to act, for instance, on something. Then it's a legitimate pursuit.
I hate to sound like Antonin Scalia, but there are basic principles in the Constitution that have to be observed. And when we get to the marriage case, the point is that, yes, states have some leeway to define marriages, but not in a way that is discriminatory and violates the equal protection clauses of the Constitution.
Well,
so to say that any of these civil rights guaranteed by the Constitution should be put up for a popular vote is anathema, and certainly something we decided a long time ago in the context of the civil rights movement.
The only place I know where you're not allowed to vote on civil rights issues is the District of Columbia. Now, the comptroller of the state...
Wait, we're not finished with the Republican candidates.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Scott Walker, who I continue to believe is the front runner for the nomination.
Because the Koch brothers own him and want him.
Even before. And here's his answer to the same-sex wedding question. He says he has attended the wedding reception of a lesbian cousin of his wife. He didn't go to the ceremony, but he did go to the reception. I think he said he couldn't go to the ceremony. And
the reception was held somewhat later. It wasn't like a scheduling conflict that day.
He didn't really answer whether he would have gone to the wedding, but he did go to the reception. And Rick Perry has just weighed in, saying he probably would go to the wedding, but yelling at Hugh Hewitt for asking gotcha questions.
Gotcha questions.
Yeah.
All right. The comptroller of the state of New York, Tom DiNapoli, is trying to introduce a new principle into board diversity. We think of board diversity in terms of people of color, women, and that kind of stuff. Well, he's gotten two big companies, Monster Beverage and Standard Pacific, to include sexual orientation and gender identity in their board diversity considerations.
Very good.
Yeah.
Let's
Quotas.
see. Follow up on Michigan and the Granville, Michigan auto repair shop owner who doesn't want to serve gay people and is probably very sorry he ever said anything. But what he does say, he stands up for his statement, God is first in my life, and people are making too many threats against me. Well, it turns...
Like get a license for your business?
He's
Which he thinks is an abuse of state
intrusion.
Power.
He's also unlicensed as an auto mechanic.
Well, one of the big companies that supplies them said, take our logo off your website.
Yes. And it turns out he also was convicted of assault and battery in 1999.
That's what happens.
Yeah. In Denver, in June, they're going to hold something called the Western Conservative Summit, another one of these right-wing extremist conferences.
Well, speaking of, go ahead.
Well, they rejected a paid booth request by the Log Cabin Republicans, but the Colorado Republican Party has offered to share their booth with the Log Cabins.
Staying in the West, the Pacific Justice Institute, a right-wing group, is promoting a referendum to fine anyone using a restroom not matching your biological sex. I mean, this is an obsession of theirs, an absurd obsession. but we'll see how far they get with it.
That's in California. In Nevada, there was a proposal for one of these bio-sex-only bathroom use bills, and they have just defeated it. Nevada's doing a great job of defeating bad bills. They defeated a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, too. And in Colorado, a Senate committee blocked a bill that would have said that to change your gender on your birth certificate does not require surgery anymore. This was a bad 3-2 vote there.
In San Antonio, the mayor there, Ivy Taylor, she replaced Julian Castro when he became HUD secretary. She was appointed. She voted against the LGBT rights ordinance in 2013, and now she's running. And during a debate, she said, well, that whole thing was a waste of time. She has not implemented the non-discrimination law appropriately, and she does have 2 pro-gay opponents in the mayor's race. The election there is May the 9th.
Somewhat disturbing story out of the U.S. State Department, where LGBT employees, we've heard for years nothing but great things about how they were promoting and helping LGBT employees, letting them take their partners to foreign postings, giving equal benefits, all that kind of thing.
Now they're saying that's a pain in the neck. So they're either
the State Department, not the employees.
Yes, they're sending them to they're giving them bad posts, maybe in places where they can bring their partners, or they're not helping them go to places with their partners.
Their advancement possibilities are narrowed because now there are only a limited number of countries they can be sent to, because some countries, Arab countries, Eastern European countries, Asian countries, whatever, are rejecting the idea of partners coming along. Although I note that in Vietnam we have a gay ambassador with his husband and kids.
We're making
but
progress
it's not
there.
just the ambassadors, it's the employees in these embassies around the world. And the State Department, rather than fighting for the right of these employees to have these postings and equal treatment, is sort of backing down in their dealings with these countries. And the LGBT employees at the State Department are speaking up.
Right. We don't have,
objecting.
by the way, we don't have full LGBT rights in New York State. We don't have a statewide law protecting people on the basis of gender identity and expression, and that bill was passed by the Assembly again, as was a bill against conversion therapy. But the New York State Senate is controlled by the right wing, and unless the governor works a deal on these things, and come on, you want to get cheered at the Pride Parade again, you better give us something else, at least.
In Southold, New York, on Long Island, on the North Fork, a terrible story. We have lost a major lesbian feminist leader, Sidney Abbott.
We have a picture of her.
Dead in a house fire at age 77. She was disabled and confined to a wheelchair and therefore unable to escape. Sidney was a very, very important and prominent leader in the 1970s.
Sidney was the author of Sappho Was a Right-On Woman. That was a pretty bold title back in the early 70s.
A liberated view of lesbianism, co-author, yes. I believe.
Yes.
She was
1971 with Barbara Love.
Yes. She was a founding board member of what was then the National Gay Task Force. She was on the board of the National Organization for Women, and
when Betty Friedan called lesbians the Lavender Menace, they formed a group called Lavender Menace. She
was a member of, she had several New York City government posts. Was she the first openly gay person on a community board in New York City?
She was. Which is significant because we didn't have very many elected officials in those days. That's not elected; it's an appointed position. She also, in recent years, edited a newsletter called "In Our Shoes" about politics, class, and poverty, and which she founded in 2008, a group called "Women's Rights Are Human Rights," a nonprofit. So, a pioneer.
Definitely a pioneer. I knew some of these pioneers. I was certainly around when they were working, and they were giants.
Right.
Giants of progressive politics, vision, courage, and to lose her at 77 is a huge loss. And of course, it got some news coverage, which I was happy to see, but she really an enormously important person, Sidney Abbott. Look her up.
Yes.
We also lost a young person, Sam Taub, 15, a transgender guy, teenager, who was a star of the Junior Roller Derby in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Suicide, harassed, bullied, loss of a young person. Terrible.
But a victory in South Carolina for a trans teen, Chase Culpepper. We have a picture of her. She will be allowed to retake her license photo at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they will apologize to her, and they will try to treat transgender people with respect in the future. This was a case where, you know, she came in for the photo, and they said, you got to take off that makeup, you got to put on different clothes. This was a case brought by the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. Chase identifies as a girl now. And originally did not, but is transgender, and it's a great victory for all transgender folks.
Well, it's just ridiculous, and as people pointed out when this story first came up last year or whenever it was, that you know, a middle-aged woman walks into a DMV and has makeup on and goes to have her picture taken, and they don't say, scrub off your makeup.
Well, they did it because they're transphobic in that place in South Carolina.
And
as they are in many places.
Yes. Also a tragic story from Atlanta. A major lesbian and civil rights activist, Kathy Montoya, was murdered. It seems almost a coincidence. This guy had killed his estranged wife, fled from the scene, was being chased. A car broke down, stopped and went to Kathy Montoya's house to steal her car, and in the process ended up murdering her. She was also a very well-known and important activist in the Atlanta area. She worked on immigrant rights, LGBT rights, civil rights, and it's just a very tragic story. And then she leaves a wife.
And then an outrageous story comes out of Pennsylvania at McGuffey High School in Claysville. Now, they had the Day of Silence there, which is for gay people to show that we are silenced. They had it on April 15th. It's usually on the 17th because they were on a trip. Anyway, a group of students decided to protest this by writing anti-gay on their hands. They wore flannel shirts in protest. Flannel shirts? I mean...
for anti-gay day?
Yeah, exactly.
Not very bright.
They posted Bible verses on the lockers of LGBT students, called the kids dykes and faggots, and pushed them in the halls, and circulated a lynch list. So this is out of hand.
And hung a noose on a American flagpole. And this wasn't just a one-day event. They have this as a rolling event. The first day was flannel shirts. The second day was orange, for whatever reason. They have a whole schedule of ongoing anti-gay days.
Some of these views I would defend on First Amendment grounds, but this is harassment.
Yes,
and it should be punished.
And harassment is a mild term for what turns out to have been the motive of the killer in Goldsboro, North Carolina, who killed his boss. He's a neo-Nazi. He has no remorse for killing his gay boss. He hates gay people. He hates non-whites. He's a
mess.
He is.
In Connecticut, at Gateway Community College in New Haven, they're going to let students and faculty use a preferred alternative first name on their student or faculty IDs and postings and things. It's especially, of course, helpful for transgender students who, if they have to post their legal names, can cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Maryland passed 2 LGBT measures. Did we talk about this? One was infertility treatments for lesbians, and the other birth certificates for people who are transgender or intersex. But the Republican governor Hogan will not state his position on them. Larry Hogan.
They passed by big enough margins in the Democratic-controlled legislature that they can probably override his veto if he decides that's what he's going to do.
A couple of Catholic Church notes?
Okay.
All right. Well, first of all, the big story was that the Vatican abruptly ended its crackdown on U.S. nuns who were accused of promoting radical feminist themes. Now, they met with Pope Francis, and they said his vision has captivated our hearts. But the Roman Catholic Church, if you didn't know, still bars women from leadership posts, and it bars gay clergy. So,
And in announcing that they were, calling off the fatwa against U.S. nuns, they gratuitously said again, and we're against same-sex marriage.
Right.
France is still waiting to hear what they have to say about the nominated gay ambassador to the Vatican.
Yeah. Now, in San Francisco, 100 prominent Catholics took out an ad in the San Francisco Chronicle asking the Pope to remove Archbishop Cordileone, who we've told you a lot about. He's very anti-gay. They said he's created an atmosphere of divisiveness and intolerance with that morality code for high school teachers. The signers include the former head of Catholic Charities. Now, they're asking for a new leader, but they're not saying, why don't you try a woman? Why don't you try an out gay?
You are a dreamer.
Wait a minute.
They're not going to get rid of this guy, let alone get a woman.
If you're embarrassed by his positions, how about standing up for what's right? I'm not trying to be naive. This is what needs to happen in that church.
I know you're not trying to be naive.
Well.
Nonetheless, thank you to Howard University in Washington, D.C., where 100 people came out to counter a protest by the Westboro Baptist Church.
But in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Catholic bishop there banned a PFLAG event. Now, apparently some of these events do take places in Catholic facilities because it included Sister Janine Gramick, who's the co-founder of the New Ways Ministry, which, is just trying to get us to talk about gay issues in the church.
Yeah. And in Denver, the Azucar Bakery is under continuing harassment and an attack by these so-called religious right-wingers. They've developed this national campaign where they call up bakeries and florists and whatever, and the bakeries, they say, will you make me a cake that says, the Bible says gay marriage is wrong? And the bakery says, well, we're allowed not to make that. We'll make you a cake, we'll make you a Bible cake, but we're not going to print that.
We'll give you, you can put whatever you want on it.
Yeah. So,
you do the writing.
Yeah. So someone said, just do it and get over it.
It sort of shocks me then that the new Bloomberg News poll says 3/4 of Americans say sexual orientation should be protected the same way race is in civil rights.
Well, 3/4 of Americans think it already is. But we're having a demonstration about that next week. We'll get to that. Meanwhile, thank you to the NBC Nightly News, which I'm not usually inclined to praise, but they're doing a nice little series on a transgender kid, Jacob's story. Very moving. I saw the first episode. It was good. And in California, Calvin Chang, who is both a lawyer and a prison guard, is suing the so-called conversion therapist Benjamin Kaufman, who is a co-founder of North.
The North Reparative Therapy Group.
Yes. Chang filed a sexual orientation discrimination suit against the California Corrections Department because he felt he was being discriminated against as gay. And they told him he had to go to conversion therapy. Nice. California.
Not Iran.
So they send him to this guy, Benjamin Kaufman, and he was locked up and guarded by a large dog by this conversion therapist. So now Chang has more lawsuits to file. Good luck to you. That's terrible.
Interesting thing happening in New York where the Attorney General here, Eric Schneiderman, is investigating if the Boy Scouts are discriminating in the hiring of adults on the basis of sexual orientation. Now, the Scouts have a policy of no out Scout Masters 18 and over. The New York Council hired an out gay Eagle Scout who is 18, Pascal Tessier. The Attorney General is asking the national organization if that's a problem.
Because they haven't said anything.
David Boyce is the lawyer for Tessier, though he's unaware if his client is being prevented from starting his job.
Well, the deal is that the Supreme Court of the United States some years ago said the Boy Scouts could assert a religious moral imperative to not hire gay people as a private organization. So then they got in trouble with a lot of city governments that were giving them preferential treatment, and they got kicked out of a lot of places. And then they finally decided, okay, we can let gay scouts be part of the organization, but not leaders. And the Attorney General of New York is saying, well, that Supreme Court decision really only applied to the scouts, not in employment matters to the leadership, just to the membership of the organization. So it's parsed out.
I've known gay people who work in these councils. I don't know how they do it, given the fact that the organization is discriminatory in many ways.
There's a lot of don't ask, don't tell going on.
Yes, there is.
Congratulations to the John C. Anderson LGBT-friendly senior affordable apartments in Philadelphia, which is getting an award from the American Institute of Architects.
Is that the full title?
Yes, it is. Because you can't have an LGBT only, because that would be discriminatory.
That's right.
So they're LGBT friendly. So the American Institute of Architects is impressed by the sort of community effort to build this place in the center city. And
they're saying that some of the older people there are becoming activists as a result of being there.
We want a place like that. And really, complicated and sad story, the upcoming end of the Michigan Women's Music Festival. It will hold, according to its creator and lifelong organizer, Lisa Vogel. She wrote a note on Facebook this week saying, I'm ending the festival. We are celebrating 40 years in August, and that's it.
The life cycle, she said, of the event is coming to closure.
Yeah,
and if you want to do something else, go ahead, but of course, tremendous controversy around it in recent years.
Some say it's coming to an end because so many performers have refused to perform there anymore because of what they perceive as a trans exclusion policy.
Right.
It's complicated. All right, shall we get to the Supreme Court? Tuesday.
It's about time.
Tuesday, April 28th.
Oral arguments.
On the cases from 4 states, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee, around same-sex marriage. 2 questions. 1, does the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, equal protection, due process require that same-sex couples be allowed to marry everywhere in the United States?
Yes, it does.
And question 2, which may be made moot by the answer to the first one, should same-sex couples legally married in one state be recognized as legally married in another state, even if that second state does not allow
we've got two lawyers arguing on our side, and also the Solicitor General gets to weigh in on this
for 15 minutes
for the United States.
And that may be unprecedented in this. I'm not entirely positive. But we're going to have Evan Wolfson, creator of Freedom to Marry, here next week to dissect all of this.
Well, you're going to be able to listen to the arguments. I think as soon as they finish the case, they're going to post the not live time, but they're going to post the audio of the arguments.
Yes, and it'll be
which is very rare for the court.
No, they always post the audio.
Always.
Yeah, I think so, or most. But it'll be just a couple of hours of arguments, and it should be fascinating, and there'll be a lot of news coverage of it, obviously, huge news coverage. But we'll get the inside view from the guy who really sort of created the concept 30 years ago.
And of course,
in his Harvard thesis, he posited same-sex marriage.
Back in the 1940s. No, it was in the 80s, I guess, right?
Well, it could have been then, he'll tell us. But meanwhile, there's an interesting story that has come out about same-sex marriage in the 1970s. You may remember, because you've heard it here frequently, that in 1975, Boulder, Colorado's clerk decided...
A commie. No, she was very progressive person.
She was progressive, and it was pointed out to her that the marriage law in Colorado was not gender specific. And so she said, what the heck, I'll give marriage licenses to same-sex couples. So she did. And one of the couples that showed up was Richard Adams and Anthony Sullivan. Richard Adams was a naturalized U.S. citizen. Anthony Sullivan was from Australia. And they wanted to get married because they were in love and because they wanted legal status for Anthony Sullivan, the Australian. So they got married. And then they applied to the Immigration and Naturalization Service for a spousal visa for Anthony.
And they got back a letter from the government,
which said,
you have failed to establish that a bona fide marital relationship can exist between two faggots. That is what the letter said. Literally.
So they filed against this. They went to court, and in 1985 they went before a panel, a three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit. You've heard a lot about the Ninth Circuit.
Very liberal circuit in the West.
And the Ninth Circuit three-judge panel ordered Anthony Sullivan deported. And who was one of the judges on that panel?
I'm guessing Justice Anthony Kennedy.
You would be correct. 1985, Anthony Kennedy, hero of the Romer v. Evans decision at the Supreme Court, hero of the Lawrence v. Texas decision, and expected to be the controlling vote on the marriage cases argued next week.
We're hoping for a bigger decision than just 5-4.
Well, we always hope. We always hope.
We are hoping, and but the other thing that we're hoping for.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's not rush past this case.
No.
The question is Anthony Kennedy, who told Anthony Sullivan he had to leave the country because his marriage was not valid in 1985, making up for all that with his decisions in Romer v. Evans and Lawrence v. Texas.
Whether or not he's making up for it, he's going to have to go with some precedents that have been set by the Supreme Court by Anthony Kennedy.
Exactly.
Since then, these are the things that have changed since 1972, which is the first time the Supreme Court addressed the issue of same-sex marriage and said, for want of a federal issue, you guys aren't married. This was a Minnesota couple.
By the way, a documentary about Adams and Sullivan and their long, long struggle for recognition of their marriage.
It's a fascinating story.
The documentary is called Limited Partnership, and it's running on PBS's Independent Lens series on June 15th. Mark that down.
They did. They left in exile. I think they first moved to England. Then they snuck back in the country.
Yes, they did.
And just lived
illegally. And then they almost got married, but then Adams died the next day.
Well, they kept having objections to having to get married again since they considered their Colorado marriage legal, even though the government didn't.
Exactly. So anyway, arguments in the Supreme Court next Tuesday, audio available very shortly after, and then the next day we will tape our interview with Evan Wolfson, which you will see by next Thursday or whenever you see this show.
What I was going to say in relationship to all this, in terms of Justice Kennedy and how he is going to rule, is he has never given us a decision that says gays are entitled to heightened scrutiny by the court. And that is one of the things we're looking for, we are hoping for, in the marriage decision. Of course, we want to win the marriage cases. That's going to be the key thing. But we are hoping for a broader decision that means that we don't have to keep going back every time we need our rights protected.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that one of the ways we, there have been a variety of decisions around the country over the last couple of years on marriage, some of which have invoked a higher level of scrutiny. Some have done a sort of middle range that doesn't really exist, but they've invented it. But many of them have just said the lowest level of scrutiny, it doesn't even pass that, rational basis. There is just no good reason for barring same-sex couples from marriage. And so while it would be nice to have heightened scrutiny because then that would change the way we're regarded in a lot of ways across the country in
all courts.
If discrimination against us cannot even pass a rational basis
in the marriage case, but they might find it in other areas.
Maybe. So there are going to be rallies before the Supreme Court arguments to sort of get us all up to speed and energized, cheerleading. It's like the bonfire before the big game. Here in New York, we'll be meeting at Times Square on Monday, the 27th at 6 p.m. Gilbert Baker is busily sewing away all sorts of new banners that we're going to
Gilbert Baker, the father of the rainbow flag.
Yep. But there are rallies all over the country, and if you go to uniteformarriage.org, you can find out what's happening in your local area.
And the Supreme Court gave us a little appetizer this week when they refused the National Organization for Marriage appeal of the Oregon ruling.
Yet again.
That let gays marry due to lack of standing was the reason.
Exactly. And in Guam, is the governor confused or is he lying? The lesbian couple applied for a marriage license.
A politician?
Were refused. The attorney general said to the governor, Governor, we're in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit decided this a long time ago. The governor is saying, well, no, the marriage is still on hold in Alaska and Montana in the Ninth Circuit. Well, no, it isn't. They're getting married in Montana and Alaska, and that is just completely untrue. So is he confused? Is he lying? What's going on there? So Guam is still in play.
I want to go back to the Supreme Court case just for one note. Obviously, tons of amicus briefs have been filed, but a significant one was filed by retired military officers. They say that the patchwork of marriage laws in this country hurts military families and threatens national security. You got that? But apparently they were very influential in a previous case, and I forget what it was about, but because obviously in the military where people have to relocate and can't control where they're going, this is very, very important. And they say we're losing some of our best personnel to the private sector because we can't protect them fully.
And another footnote, in Franklin County, Kentucky, a circuit court judge has ruled for two Lexington same-sex couples who were denied marriage licenses in 2013, but that decision is on hold pending what happens in the Supreme Court.
And in Michigan, the wicked Governor Rick Snyder opposes lifting a stay in a case of a Michigan man with brain cancer who wants his New York marriage recognized.
We should move on to international news unless you've got something else there.
No, it's all right.
Okay. The Prime Minister of Ireland has refused to add a conscience clause, basically a religious freedom clause, to the proposed marriage law that's going to be voted on May 22nd.
That's very significant. And I'm surprised to see, I'm not surprised that Muslims and some Christian groups were asking for it, but Quakers were asking for it. I thought they did same-sex marriages.
I don't know. But on the other hand, in London, the Seventh-day Adventists have canceled their Holy Sexuality Conference of ex-gays and conversion therapists because there was a public outcry and 40,000 people signed a petition, and they backed down? Shocking.
El Salvador, they approved a bill in the legislature banning same-sex marriage and gay adoption, but it needed 2/3 or 56 votes. That's what it's going to need on May 1st. It's only got 47 votes so far.
In Tonga, the government is expected to ban same-sex marriage and abortion, so the church will not freak out at the ratification of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women.
Malawi has passed a new law. You could argue on the good side, it raises the age for marriage from 16 to 18, but it excludes gay couples, of course, but it also bars protections for gays. It won't recognize transgender folks, and gay sex is equated with rape and sexual harassment and criminalized.
Malawi?
Yes.
Crossing it off my vacation list. But in Vietnam, the health ministry is writing new regulations to recognize transgender people.
In Jamaica, President Obama was said to have met in private with the leaders there and placed the treatment of LGBT people as one of the first topics.
Well, we showed you last week him speaking to a town hall of students and praising a local lesbian leader. But the news this week that leaked out is that in his private meetings with the Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, He laid this on the table as part of his agenda.
She was shouted out in New York by gay activists when she spoke at a church, and she was not too happy about it.
Not happy. And this week in New York, I went to a screening of a movie about abuse of gay people in Jamaica called The Abominable Crime. It was really moving, some personal stories. And it, I think, is going to be available on Netflix and stuff in a couple of months.
I want to see it.
Maybe we'll show it here.
Ann was telling me all about it before
really
the show.
Good.
It's terrific.
Strange story related to Bermuda. There's a cruise line. Cruise ships often do this, advertise their wedding services. Come on our cruise ship and get married. We'll do a big thing.
Why not?
So a lesbian couple tried to book a marriage ceremony on a cruise ship and were told that they could not do this because the cruise ship is registered in Bermuda and the Bermuda laws do not allow same-sex marriage. Don't you get into international waters at some point? Aren't you outside those laws?
Maybe Mike Bloomberg can do something about that.
So
he lives in Bermuda half the time.
Activists in Bermuda are upset about this.
In South Africa, they have the Mr. Gay World contest, and India's entrant withdrew because of threats to his family and to himself, his family back home. Now, he's a Brisbane-based model in Australia, but this is what happened. There's a picture of him there, Mr. Syed.
And in Mexico, the Supreme Court has again said that the ban against same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, didn't they decide that before? Well, it turns out that they have to decide it 140 times, 5 times from each state.
Literally. You know, we're waiting on one big case that's before the Supreme Court next week. They got to do it 140 times.
Whoa.
In AIDS news.
Yes.
Well, I went to the Broadway Cares Easter Bonnet competition. This is a group that raises money for AIDS and other issues. They raised $4.7 million this season. There were no people like show people. Helen Mirren was even there presenting some of the awards. Nice to see her.
Please do what's the one? The Prime Suspect series.
She's
again.
in the audience on Broadway. The Audience is the name of the show.
Yes.
Plays Queen Elizabeth.
Governor Mike Pence of Indiana has been forced to extend the needle exchange program in southern Indiana for another 30 days. They really need 30 years, a lifetime on this, because the explosion of HIV cases from shared needle use of these amphetaminic drugs is just horrendous.
Not entirely surprising, but there's a report from the United Kingdom that the number of people admitted to hospital with HIV as a secondary diagnosis has doubled since 2004, which is a good sign that people with HIV are living far longer. But the downside is that some of these old people with HIV are being denied care. A quarter of the HIV population there is over 50.
All right, entertainment news.
Sure.
All right, we're all getting ready for Friday night's Bruce Jenner, Diane Sawyer interview. I don't know about you, but I have a little trepidation. But Wendy Williams on her show says this shouldn't be on TV. This is it hurts the kids, his kids. They're adults, for God's sake.
They're also exhibitionists.
Exactly.
Haven't they been on TV for the last 100 years?
And then Sandra Bernhard went on Wendy Williams' show and agreed with her.
Oh, for God's sakes. They're all exhibitionists.
It's educational. Don't try to hide the truth.
Come on.
Really.
They're just uncomfortable with it. Why don't you just say so?
Whip through some reviews, and then I have some other notes.
Well, all right. 4 shows this week. I saw An American in Paris with our associate producer, Bill Ballman. It is a feast for the eyes and ears from Christopher Wheeldon, who is a choreographer and the director. It's Gershwin tunes. Robert Fairchild is in the Gene Kelly role. It's very smartly written by Craig Lucas.
Yeah.
And it's very well acted, even though these are mostly just dancers. Wolf Hall.
I'm watching the TV show on PBS.
I am too, and it tracks fairly closely in terms of exact dialogue, because they're both from the Hilary Mantel novels. This is 2 plays from the Royal Shakespeare Company. I think it's a terrific ensemble led by Ben Miles there as Thomas Cromwell in the Tudor court. It's a chilling pageant of political ruthlessness, my kind of play, and it's very entertaining. Then there's It Should Have Been You. Now, this is from the spousal team of Brian Hargrove and David Hyde Pierce. They're married to each other. David directed, Brian wrote it. It's an inspiring cast. Tyne Daly, Harriet Harris as the moms. But it's you know, it's a wedding musical with a twist, which we're not supposed to say what it is, but it's basically...
You can guess.
Witless. And then there's Hand to God, a dirty sock puppet show that I will just say I did not appreciate.
Okay, well, there we are. Well, I'm hoping to appreciate the new TV show, The Prancing Elites Project, about a troupe of black gay men who are like terrific dancers who do this in
parades.
Mobile, Alabama, marched in the Christmas parade. And they're very controversial, and some people try to keep them out of these parades, but they're activists as well as dancers, and very fierce is probably true. They're on the Oxygen channel starting tonight as we tape, so we haven't seen it, but it got a rave review in the New York Times. I'm looking forward to that.
The TV series Turn, about the American Revolution on AMC, has been intimating some gay characters, and has some characters intimating Washington likes guys.
George Washington.
Yes. Well, who do you think? We're talking about Martha?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what to think about Emma Stone as Billie Jean King in this upcoming
Battle of the Sexes, a movie about the fight, the match with Bobby Riggs, played
I can believe Steve Carell as Bobby Riggs, but Emma Stone.
She's a good actress.
Okay. I'm looking forward to us seeing Fun Home tomorrow night.
Yes, we'll have a review next week.
The Alison Bechdel play, graphic novel turned into a play by Lisa Crone.
It's already, did it win the Pulitzer?
And Alison Bechdel won a MacArthur Genius Grant. Well, I saw the workshop at the Public Theater, and then we saw the full production at the Public. Genius, fantastic, and I was a little scared about it moving to Broadway, but it's been getting rave reviews.
It has.
We'll let you know what we think.
We'll decide. Actress model Patricia Velasquez, who's been in The Mummy and The L Word, said she is very gay, not bisexual, and very proud also.
Also very gay is the Iceman in the X-Men comic books. The X-Men 40 is coming out, and Bobby Drake as the Iceman is coming out in this new version.
GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, has decided to desecrate the memory of Vito Russo, great activist, by giving their Vito Russo Award to Thomas Roberts. Now, Thomas Roberts is out, you know, an out gay man, but he has disgraced himself in the last couple of years twice. One by going to Russia when we were asking people to boycott it, not to do news, but to host the Miss Universe pageant for anti-gay birther Donald Trump. And the other thing that he did, of course, was he broke with the community and marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade with the NBC group, not respecting the boycott that we have had of that.
Sad. I want to again recommend Claire Koss's play Emmett Down in My Heart at the Castillo Theater through May 17th. And Eastern Boys, your much-loved movie, is going to be playing in L.A. starting May 1st. Not yet, but I'm going to watch it shortly. And
you gotta give it a chance.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week with Evan Wolfson. Stay tuned for those Supreme Court arguments on Tuesday. Bye.
Bye-bye.